Hey, what's up, everybody? I do apologize if this might go off. Cameras have been known to do that. But I'm pretty sure one question that's always legal, well, not legal, but, oh, there you go. Has always basically been on the minds of a lot of people is what is the difference in What's the difference with the regular SD cards compared to micro SD cards? Well, quite frankly, there is no big difference. I mean, when you take a look at the different SD cards that are out there, there isn't no real big difference. The micro SD cards are basically little tiny versions of the regular SD cards. In fact, I'm using a micro SD card right now with the camera. The only difference is that with MicroSD, compared to the regular ones like this one, the only difference, like I said, with the MicroSD compared to the regular SD cards here, the only big difference is the fact that they're smaller. But because a lot of people are so used to SD themselves, a lot of companies out there, from Scan to PNY, Sony, Microsoft, whoever, Kodak, whoever comes out with the SD cards, always end up selling the micro SD along with what's known as an adapter. Now, this might look like a regular SD card to you, but it's actually, if you take a look right there, that little, I don't know how well that would show up on the camera, that little tab right, that little grip right there, out it comes, and you see this is a little insert slot, because this may look like an SD card, and in a sense it is, but it's a micro SD card adapter. That's what this is. And this here is the micro SD card. That's it right there. And the reason these were created is because, well, from my personal opinion and experience, and this is how you use this thing. You put this inside to the, like that, and I think you got a little lock here, maybe. Yeah, you got a little lock that locks it. Oh, maybe not. Oh, that's weird. That locks it into place. Oh yeah, the top, when it's locked in like that, it locks it into place. Basically makes it a little harder to pull out, but it still comes out. I don't know what this white thing is about, but oh yeah, it locks it. This top one is to lock the SD card in, and the bottom one is to let it loose. But you can pull it out if you want. But anyway, that's what the adapters are. They're to basically put your little micro SD cards in, lock them into place with the top lock here, best you can, and use them as regular SD cards. Especially if you have a camera like what I'm using. Now, again though, the reason these micro SD cards, from my own personal experience, I can tell you were made, from my own personal experience, is due to the fact that a lot of us nowadays have laptops and streaming notebooks and devices like this that that require additional storage or additional data, or additional storage or data to be used. Cameras nowadays, unlike this one, but one I do have in my room. Now, some regular cameras, like this, or the one I have in my room, or the other one I have, require, well, not like this one, but the other one I have in my room, require that you have, and it require an SD, basically come with a micro SD slot. In other words, you cannot use SD cards. And the reason, again, these micro SD cards are made, in my opinion, is because it makes it easier and more quicker and more accessible to get to your photos or video or your saved data. In other words, it allows you an easier access. Now, again, like I said, nowadays there are laptops, computers, notebooks, if you will, that have micro SD slots. The reason being is because it's easier to use. It's easier to, just put in, push in, push out. There you go. It's right there for you to have. You don't have to worry about going out and getting an SD card reader just to connect via USB to your computer so you can get your stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying that certain computers, laptops, and stream books don't come with, I'm not saying they don't come I'm not saying they don't come with SD card slots, they do. But nowadays, the micro SD cards are basically the way to go. Now, true, the SD cards still get sold because cameras like what I'm using require SD cards. But, like I said, majority of stuff nowadays is kind of balanced 50-50, more leaning towards the SD card kind of way. Now, one of the other questions I'm sure a lot of people have is there a difference in space? Like, how much more do you get? Is it equal, less, or more? Well, when I place this micro SD card that I'm using right now with its SD adapter into my camera, it only gave me a minute less of 5 hours 4 minutes of the 5 hour. It only gave me about a minute left, or a minute less of the 5 hours 1080p 60 frames per second mode that I'm currently on right now. It only gave me a minute less. It's still at 5 hours, but it only gave me a minute less. Now, with that said, the biggest difference is the modes you use it on. Now, when I used this inside this camera, it gave me only about 74 minutes of 1080p 60 frames per second. And this is a 16 gigabyte micro SD card. It only gave me that less. Now, if I would go to other modes like 1080p, just plain 1080p, or 720, or 480, yeah, the time would have gone up substantially. Same with the card I'm using right now. But it all depends on the device that you have. Now, if I was to take an 8 gigabyte deal, then there's no doubt that I would have less than maybe an hour of 1080p 60 frames per second mode on this camera. How do I know that? Well, when I placed the micro SD card, the 8 gigabyte one that I have in my other Kodak camera, in here, it gave me 3 minutes less of what I have on external hard drive. See, on external hard drive, I have 67 hours. Or, yeah, just about 67 hours. I have about 67 hours on there. So, and that's just here, and that's a 4 gigabytes externally that's on here. 4 gigabytes. So when I added an SD card of 8 gigabytes to start running from that, it gave me only 64 hours. 3 hours less, but still plenty of time. However, when I added this in there, it gave me 87 hours. It doubled it. So again, it all depends on the brand and the size. So at 16 gigabytes with this, I was able to get 20 hours more. So imagine, or maybe in the case of micro SD cards, I was able to get 22 hours more. Basically, I was just about to get a day's extra worth of audio. Now, like I said, with the SD card, with 16 gigabytes on the micro, now with the 16 gigabyte micro SD card, I was able to get 20 more hours, or essentially an extra day or so worth. So, depending on what size you have, you can end up getting more time, more space. So let's say I was to take a 32 gigabyte micro SD card and put it in here, I would probably end up getting maybe 107 hours worth of time. And if I put a 64 gigabyte micro in there, which I'm using in my camera right now, it would probably give me 127 hours worth of time, all around that time frame. But again, a lot of people always ask that question. You know, is that good? We'll always ask the question, well, is that better? Well, yeah, if you're using something like this and you have, let's say you're going to college and you have different folders in your digital voice recorder. Let's say you have different folders in there, and each one is for a different class and subject that you're doing, and you need to basically take down or have some kind of voice memo of the notes, of the teachings that you're getting from your teacher, your professor. Then you're going to want something like maybe a 64 gigabyte or a 32 gigabyte micro SD card to help back you up. Excuse me. Because the external memory is good enough, but you're going to want something more just in case. And I would recommend more is better. True, it does cost a little bit more. The more space you want, the more memory you want, the more it's going to cost. Hold on, I'll be right back. Sorry, I have to take care of something that involves memory. But like I said, the more you want, the more it's going to cost. The more you want, the more it's going to cost. The only problem is if you don't have the money to get what you want, then you're going to have to deal with what you can afford. That's the only catch-22. Now let's say though you have a regular camera like this, and you have a micro SD or a regular SD like this, which is 64 gigabytes. Now this here is running on an 8 gigabyte SD card. Now the 8 gigabyte, and that's my dog in the background. The 8 gigabyte by itself gives me 3,267 photos. I don't know if that'll show up very well. It gives me 3,267 photos. Now as far as video goes, it goes to 80. Now when I've used this in the past, and again I don't know, let's see, make sure it shows up, there we go. Now when I've used this in the past as it's never. Hold on for a second. Now, when I've used the video portion of that camera, and that's my dog's toy here, try to keep her busy. Like I said, when I've used the video mode on this camera in the past, anytime I would keep, and a lot of my videos you've seen over the past 8 years have been done with this camera. It would never really start to go down to less than 80 until after maybe 6 or 7 videos, depending on the length. That would be about it. Now, when I calculated a little bit, and I said to myself, well, how is that possible? I looked online and I realized it's because I have probably well over 3 hours worth of video footage on this card. Because if I'm able to get 3,200 or 3,267 photos with an 8 gigabyte deal, I can only imagine what I get with how much video footage I get with this. So I usually get about maybe 3 or 4 hours worth with 8 gigabytes. Well, maybe about 2.5. Let's put it that way. Yeah, about 2.5, 3 hours on here. Now, that's also probably pretty much probably says the same thing for the MicroSD card. So we're going to take this out, and I'm going to show you the difference. I'll show you the difference right now. Now we got the MicroSD 16 gigabyte in there locked in place. Now I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm going to place that in. Now it still says about 80 minutes, right? It still says 80 minutes. Now when you go to photo though, you might say, well, it just dropped off substantially. I don't know why, but it did. It just dropped down to 2,139. I don't know why it did that, but it dropped down substantially. That was weird. Again, I think it all depends on the device. But that was a huge drop. That shouldn't have happened. And that's a 16 gigabyte. Yeah, 16 gigabytes. It shouldn't have done that. I don't know why it dropped down so substantially. But I guess it all depends on what you have. Let's try that again, because that was kind of weird. No, it still says it, so. But still, that's plenty of photos to do. I guess it all depends on the on the card that you have in there. Like we'll try the. Okay, first of all, let me put this back in its case so I don't lose it. Let's try the 64 gigabyte regular SD card. And this is not just an HC, this is an XC as they call it, Elite Performance. So we'll put that inside. I don't think it's got any photos on it.